She-Ra is a really well-written show. I mean this both in terms of individual episodes and season-long arcs. And an especially enjoyable feature of this kind of good writing are the amounts of patterns, callbacks, and parallels that we get throughout the show. And there's one pattern in particular that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and it's the little internal trilogy that's formed by Promise, Remember, and Corridors. There's a ton of cool stuff here, even just with the basic facts of the episodes. The episodes are similarly equidistant from each other. Promise is the 11th episode, Remember is the 25th, and Corridors is the 42nd. Promise and Remember are 14 episodes apart, and Remember and Corridors are 17 episodes apart. This is just to say that in the way they're distributed, they kind of divide the show into 3 eras, as well as the beginning, middle, and end of an internal arc. When I talk about the trilogy, I mean that the episodes share a number of connections, namely their use of music motifs, how they recontextualize the promise, and their commentary on memory. The goal here isn't to prove that this was something intended all along, it's just to look at these 3 episodes and what they share, and what that might have to say. Today's video is sponsored by AtlasVPN. AtlasVPN is a virtual private network developed by top cybersecurity specialists that make the internet accessible and safe for you. When you use AtlasVPN, it encrypts your data, gives you a whole new IP address, and protects you from spying, ads, and viruses. And you get notified anytime someone is trying to steal your data. Atlas has the best VPN deal on the market for just $1.83 per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And with just a single Atlas subscription, you can protect all of your devices. But I haven't even told you my favorite bit. Atlas also makes your TV and movie catalog a whole lot bigger. Streaming services usually geo-lock their content, meaning you can only watch certain things in certain places. But with Atlas VPN, you can decide you're anywhere else in the world and watch all of your niche shows without the whims of licensing rights. Right now, Atlas VPN Premium is giving away a huge discount, just $1.83 per month and 3 months extra with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can take advantage of this deal by clicking the link in the video description below. This is a limited time offer, so be sure to snag it before it's gone. So, in each of these 3 episodes, we hear both the childhood motif and the promise theme, specifically in that order. This was something that stood out to me just because of how specific a detail it is. The childhood motif tends to signify togetherness, and the promise theme, conflict. Given the title, this is, of course, where we're first introduced to both the promise as an idea and the musical theme itself. This is also the premiere of the musical motif that's colloquially known as the childhood theme, which represents childhood, obviously. We first hear it quietly in the background of this scene.
Does it look broken to you? It's not broken. You're fine.
As we learn about Catra and Adora's dynamic as kids. These flashbacks establish innocence, playfulness, and the shelter of friendship in a loveless environment. All the stuff they had that they both want back, but in different ways. As the motif abruptly cuts off, that warmth then gets contrasted with the iciness now. The promise theme kicks off as Catra and Adora argue, and then comes in fully during the cliff dangling scene. In the run of the episode, between reminiscing and their begrudging teamwork, it felt like maybe we were building towards some kind of breakthrough. But the promise theme here, as it often does, marks a shift. They're neither the friends we saw in the flashbacks, nor the rivals they've been up until now. From here on out, they're truly and properly enemies. The childhood motif here is barely audible. It plays for that tiny split second that Catra holds herself like a scared child, remembering their past, before launching into the most unhinged rage we've seen yet. The theme here is kind of like Catra's vulnerability, brief and hidden. And especially so in this episode, the musical themes show us Catra's internal journey. The only time the childhood motif plays is in her flashback. She's the only one who's experiencing this memory, so she's the only one who hears it. Not long after, the promise theme plays during the emotional climax of the episode as a direct response to the flashback with the other motif. The major emotion here is despair. Despair that Catra can't be reasoned with, despair at what's happening, despair at how none of this seems to be fixable. If we were holding out any hope of reconciliation, the grandiosity of the promise theme tells us that hope should plummet very fast. In Corridors, a lower, slower version of the childhood motif actually opens the episode. Like in Promise, it's scattered throughout the episode in short excerpts. We hear it in bursts each time we follow Catra into a flashback. Pieced together, this version of the motif we get is much longer than before. As Catra reflects more honestly on the past, she can see the full picture, hear the full melody. The motif completes here for the first time, and it's the prettiest and the lightest we've heard so far. Right? It's as though in those half realities that we saw before, Catra could only let herself remember half the truth, all the bitterness and loneliness, and none of the sweetness, because to do so would be painful, and also mean admitting that she was, at least a little, wrong. Once again, the promise theme plays during the climax of an episode, but instead of underscoring tragedy, or at least just tragedy, here it's tinged with a tentative bit of hope. The theme no longer signals conflict, but reunion. The theme here holds the weight of every previous interaction and everything unsaid, crashing together in little time with insufficient words. In each of these three cases, the musical motifs are the past and the present in dialogue with one another, and the core of the show's interpersonal arc is reconciling the past and the present. The promise is this thing that sort of haunts the entire show. Catra and Adora grew up in a dangerous environment, and so promised each other that they'd stay together and always look out for each other. Each of these episodes has a significant reflection on that promise and what it means. This is the first instance where Catra really starts to embrace the idea that Adora broke the promise, because despite her hurt feelings, until now, Catra's still been looking out for Adora, between friend kidnappings at least. Her conviction has been, and continues, teetering back and forth throughout the episode. It may even be that Adora was getting close to getting through to Catra because it's right at that moment that she says,
"But I never wanted to leave you. You could come with me. You could join the rebellion. I know you're not a bad person, Catra. You don't belong with the Horde."
That the Crystal Castle pulls out the big gun. Their opportunity to clarify their feelings gets cut short. But by the end, Catra becomes convinced that her desire to help Adora wasn't reciprocated. She has a new view of the promise.
"You wanted me to think I needed you. You wanted me to feel weak."
Not only did Adora break the promise to stay together,
"You never protected me!"
So now, it's no longer about keeping the promise and getting Adora back. It's just about proving herself powerful, independent, and a worthy opponent. She tells us outright.
"You wanted me to think I needed you. You wanted me to feel weak."
In her backwards way, Catra reclaims what she sees as her lost power. Adora wants her back, and now, she gets to reject her. By virtue of the perfect world, Remember shows us Catra's ideal way for the promise to be kept.
Nothing really bad can happen as long as we have each other.
"Everything will be perfect as long as we stay together. Stay with me, okay?"
This sheds some important light on the semantics of it all. The huge difference between stay with me and leaving with you. AU Catra tries to start everything over again as though, without the baggage of their past, this time it'll stick. But reality can only be held at bay by denial and space-time physics for so long. And when Catra finally looks back to the past, she remembers the promise the way Light Hope had encouraged.
"You can leave, just like I did."
Oh, because I need to follow you everywhere you go?
"Don't you get it? I am never going to go with you."
As one that was, and continues to be, broken. The saddest thing we see here about the promise is that ultimately they do want the same thing, just a completely different understanding of what that thing is. Most interesting to me, though, is that in this episode, the catalyst for the promise apparently no longer exists. As in, while the promise was made in response to danger, that danger is lessened here. Shadow Weaver is much softer, almost kind. The other cadets aren't threatening to her, they're actually friendly. But AU Catra is nonetheless attached to keeping that promise. Probably because A, she senses/knows about the real world, and B, because she's starting to access, if subconsciously, the love, not just the fear, that the promise was built on. In some of the sweetest scenes yet, Catra's interactions with Glimmer shed her zero-sum beliefs about the promise, specifically about friendship, right? Because the promise emerged out of a need for protection, it makes sense that Catra would view other people as a threat to Adora keeping her safe. But instead of a source of resentment, here, Adora's friendship with another person is actually a welcome source of connection on Prime's ship. Catra and Glimmer's mutual love and care for Adora is something they can bond over. So we see a change. The promise can be kept not just out of fear, but out of love, which Catra starts to see isn't a finite resource. So, most of all, in Corridors, the promise isn't fuel for righteous anger. It's now something Catra can keep. It's no longer about greatness or winning. Even fixing things might be out of reach. But there's that other half to the promise.
You look out for me.
If the promise ever meant anything, she can uphold it now, even if it's the last thing she can do, even if it's not enough. If hope for repair was completely gone at the end of Season 3, this is the first teeny tiny spark of it again. Because at the first sign of Catra's goodwill, Adora is ready to U-turn the ship around to save her. The promise mutually fulfilled.
You look out for me, and I look out for you.
Each of these episodes is also concerned with memory and perspective in some significant way. Since we're talking about two characters with a messy relationship to their past, this makes sense. Memory looks different and takes on new meaning from one episode to the next. Here, memory is manipulated to drive Catra and Adora apart. Light Hope unreliably narrates the story of their past with a clear agenda, to make their dynamic look as bad as possible. Light Hope taps into the misunderstanding and resentment that already exists, and uses the Crystal Castle to exploit it in 4K IMAX surround sound. The implicit message to Catra is, look how little Adora cared for you. Look at her hypocrisy. Look at how she promised to look after you, but let you suffer. Selective memories to feed the story Catra is already telling herself.
Catra, no, that's not how it was!
It's not about what happened, it's about how it feels. And so Light Hope gets exactly the response she was trying for and drives a definitive wedge between the two of them, who, at this point, are still dangerously on speaking terms. The memories are arranged to validate Catra's feelings of betrayal, and to show Adora that her friend is, in fact, too far gone to stay attached to.
You must let go.
In contrast, in Remember, memories are reworked, if subconsciously, to force Catra and Adora together. We get to see Catra's, in particular, desire to rewrite her memory. In this alternate universe, whatever mix of their consciousnesses it is, Catra returns to a vulnerability that was extinguished in Promise. It's like she sees what went wrong there and is terribly trying for a do-over. And the result of this is that Adora gets to see a side of Catra that she hasn't in a really long time. Playful, lighthearted. Some part of Catra that has no interest in fighting, but wants to relax into the comfortable routine they once had. Without even meaning to, Catra's lowered her defenses, showing the feelings that she'd be incapable of voicing without some weird deflection.
I told you it's not because I like you. I don't miss you. Get over yourself.
In contrast to Promise, which was the attempt at making things look the worst and most unsalvageable, Remember is memories arranged to be the best day ever, even wrapping around to eerily repeating how everything is perfect. This is the denial of the past, a world unaffected by everything. Not just the show's inciting incident, but everything leading up to it. There's nothing to fix because nothing was ever wrong. If the previous two episodes showed memory being tinkered with in some way, here it's finally neutral, quiet. The past is neither manipulated nor rewritten. Without outside influence and without agenda, Catra allows herself to reflect, and is startled by the simplicity of it all. So why the change in this episode? The cynical argument might be because, well, Catra has nothing left to lose and is backed into a corner on Prime's ship, and Adora is her only way out. But having gotten to know Catra and her story so far, we know that's at least not all of it. Yes, the dire situation matters, but in the sense that it leaves little room for posturing and being delusional. It's pointless here. Catra has paved this road herself, and she's reached the end of it. She's fresh out of bricks, or something. Maybe that's why here and now is specifically when she starts to remember things as they were. It's easy to tell herself a story about how terrible Adora and her friends are when she's disconnected from them. But now she has Glimmer up close, personal, and willing to connect with her. And she finally allows herself to remember what, in a way, she's kind of always known. With all our focus on memory and the promise, this trilogy is a trilogy on perspective. Memory and perspective are deeply entwined, because memories aren't an exact recall, they're colored by how we feel, context around them, and they're different every time we remember. The first 2 episodes show memories being impacted by a combination of external influence and internal biases, aka the major things getting in the way of Catra and Adora's communication and pushing them farther apart. Catra and Adora's whole conflict and the catalyst for the whole story is based on a difference in perspective. In this spirit, of course, the one thing I do wish we'd got more of is Adora's point of view, to see her inner journey from,
I mean, you are kind of disrespectful.
and
You never protected me! Shadow Weaver hurt us. I haven't forgotten that.
but it still works. And so it's fitting that this all leads to Corridors, where we see our first flashback without outside influence, and that's where things start to change for the better. Where instead of distorted half-truths, it's just a simple, honest reflection that opens a path forward. From Promise to Corridors, we get the bookends of the beginning and end of Catra's proper villain arc, and both include shots of her looking into a mirror. First disoriented in Promise, and then more soberly in Corridors. So, having gone over all these similarities, do I think the trilogy is intentional? I don't know, but probably not. What it is, I think, is a mark of good writing. I think the amount of parallels, callbacks, and symmetry between these episodes is a testament to solid writing instincts when writing significant episodes and the story's arc. So me pointing this out is less of an aha, they all planned this from the start, and more a huge amount of praise to the care, intention, and understanding put into this story. And the byproduct of this kind of understanding are these fun patterns and artistic harmony, which make the story all the more immersive, fun to watch, and fun to think about. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoy what I do, consider checking out my Patreon. You can see scripts as they're being written, get to hang out with me and ask me questions, and get exclusive videos. As always, my incredible gratitude to the patrons over on Patreon for supporting the channel and helping me do what I do.